This is Monica.
Hey, this is Melody.
And welcome to the Invisible Women Podcast.
Hello, IW listeners. Today we have with us the boss lady, Miss Felicia Duncan, top producing realtor, public speaker, educator, and author who's born and raised in Oakland, California, where she continues to live and serve her hometown. Felicia brings with her clients a wealth of expertise on the buying and the selling in this fast-changing, highly volatile, desirable market, if you had a chance to figure that out. Thank you, Miss Felicia, for being on.
Welcome.
Thank you, ladies. I am so excited to be here. It's been a long time coming, but I am so grateful for the opportunity.
Yes.
And I just want to say to all of our listeners out there, if you don't know about Felicia Duncan, you need to get to know her. If you're here in the Bay Area, she is one of the top real estate broker agents out there. She is pretty much a big deal, even though she's very low profile. I love it. She's a big deal. So welcome, Felicia. And can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know Melody gave you this intro, but just kind of like in layman terms for our listeners.
I didn't tell it all. I'll leave some for you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, I'm born and raised in Oakland. My family's from Oakland. My mom is from Oakland. I have a huge family here in Oakland. But we come from, a background of, just very modest means, right? Like these weren't, we didn't have no rich uncle, no rich auntie, anything like that. So I'm a product of the public school district. Love the city, love the Bay Area. And I got into real estate I want to say about 16 years ago. I actually was working for, I was a grant writer for the University of California for 14 years.
Okay, so you're
cool. Yeah, but I was in a situation where, there was sort of a cap on my income, right? Sort of you hit that ceiling and that's it. You know how public systems work where, you're in a tiered salary position. And once you get to that's sort of it. So, my job was comfortable, but like most people, I wanted more. I wanted more for myself. And as a single parent, I had to figure out like what it would look like to, increase my income. What does it look like to pay for a private school in Oakland? Because that's what I was paying. I think at the time, I was paying like $1,000 a month for kindergarten, right?
Wow.
What do you do to, provide for your household and have a little extra? And so that's when I started selling things other than, small stuff. Like I've always been a salesperson. My daughter would always, win the competitions at school. If, she had to sell, selling everything. She was always, number one.
Nice.
Part of that was me and, just me being the salesperson. But then we went from there to, I used to sell jewelry. I actually sold a line of jewelry. It was just like little
paparazzi.
It wasn't paparazzi, but it was Cookie Lee. I don't know if you know.
It was a few that came out.
Yeah, it was Cookie Lee where I was selling, Cookie Lee. I would be driving all across California with my cases of jewelry, a lot of people's houses and set up and all of that. And even in that, I was a top producer.
Okay.
I had a friend who was really sort of just impressed by my sales skills and said, well, if you're doing that, you should consider selling bigger ticket items.
Okay.
And the reality is I actually looked into luxury cars. I was going to sell luxury cars. Was a thing I went to the Mercedes dealership and I went to the Rolls Royce dealership, but they really didn't show me any love in that respect. They were like, girl, you ain't selling no car. You drive a Honda. How you
What you know about this life?
Right, exactly. And so from there, my friend then said, what about real estate? And I was like, I remember having my uncle had a girlfriend who was a realtor. And she was fly. And this was in, the early 80s, right? She was fly. I mean, she had a Benz, she had a house with a pool. She would always come and have her stuff on and her purses and all of that. And that was my only real sort of interaction with real estate. I just sort of remembered Maria, that she was always cute and all of that. Yeah. And of course, I grew up at one point we were, my mom lived in a what would be considered a project, but then she sort of transitioned out to, a decent neighborhood. But we had always been renters. So I didn't even understand the benefit and the magnitude of home ownership. And so my friend sort of challenged me and said, if you pass the test, I'll pay for the course. So the way I saw it was that there was no loss.
Yeah.
But the thing that got me was, I'm a numbers person. I have I do have an MBA in business. And so, my life is numbers. I'm always, sort of figuring out, how do I get from here to here? And what do the numbers need to look like for me to get there? So because of that, I looked at real estate and I'm like, wait a minute, that's a really large number. And if you get 1, 2, or 3% of that, that's like life-changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
good.
Yeah, I remember I passed the test. And to be honest with you, I didn't pass the first time. I took the test the first time and did not pass. And I was like, oh God, like
how many times did it take you to pass?
It was the second time. I passed the second. You can take it up to 3 times. And it was on the second time where I passed. But I was like, oh, this is a real thing. Like, it's like, okay, this test is hard and I didn't even really study. I was like, let me get some real effort. And so I did that and I passed the test. And I have never had a declining year in this business, but my first year, my brokerage they were pretty amazed at just sort of my production. And for me, it was nothing. I just sort of figured out it was just what I needed to do, right? Like this was my job. I sell houses. And my broker's like, how are you selling so many houses? And I was like, I don't know. I just ask everybody, do they want to buy a house or do they want to sell a house? And that's sort of the evolution of, Felicia Duncan, the business as a whole. But I remember so vividly my first check.
Okay. Well, what did that look like?
It was $9,000 16 years ago. That was epic.
Okay. That was almost like 50 grand.
Girl, I paid off a car. I paid off my debt. The school tuition was caught up. Like, we were living it up.
Up though. At least you're keeping it 100. You're like, okay, I'm about to call administrator. I'm a little behind, but I'm about to pay out that past.
And that was just the reality of it, right? And girl, when I got that first check, I said, I'm convinced this is what I do. Like, this is what I do.
This is the real deal.
And so that was sort of the motivation in the beginning. But as time went on, I began to see that people were in situations that were really messed up. And these were homeowners. And it was primarily because they just didn't have the education. No one really guided them along the way, resulting in them having houses that they couldn't keep or afford, or living in a house that was had deferred maintenance, and they had equity in their house, but they couldn't tap into it to get the equity to fix the roof or remodel a bathroom. Like, they just didn't understand or know that. And so from there came the evolution of my workshop. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. God is all in this right here in terms of like where I'm going with this, right? Like, it had nothing to do with me anymore. It wasn't about the money. I have been blessed to get to a point where the money it began to become gravy, where it was like, oh, I'm not doing this for the money so much anymore because everything is paid. I don't owe nobody nothing. I got in the bank. You know what I mean? So it got to the point where I love that. What's my calling in this industry? Because this work I'm going to do. I'm going to commit, myself to this work. But how can I, work in this industry and help people? And when I began to see people, losing houses and, just like, I think the bigger thing for me was like when people would pass away, they'd have they lose a loved one and there was a house behind, but then no one knew how to successfully, get the house sold. You know what I mean? And so that was a major challenge for people, because for people, it was like, okay, we want to sell the house. It's like, whoa. You have a whole court process involved with selling the house. You know what I mean? So that in itself didn't happen overnight. And so people were shocked to know that was the reality, but I felt that it was my job. Like, I need to educate people. Like, people need to understand and know, how they can avoid this stuff, because it's a lot of stuff that I just sort of saw as being totally avoidable. And people need to understand the benefits of home ownership. One, the sense of pride.
And so that's why I want to
go ahead.
So Felicia, that's what I want to stop you at, because your resume, it just speaks for itself. So, okay, so for our listeners out there, she kind of told you the story, her start of it. She seen, there was a fly, her uncle was dating a fly lady that was a realtor. She wanted to do that. She wanted to make some money. She was killing it. She passed her test the second time around. Which is commendable, because I've heard people take it 3 times and they're like, this is not for me. So she passed it the second time around. And ever since there, she's just been going up. There's been no downhill for her. Right. So for our, women of color, men of color, I know that you're dedicated to helping people that look like you. If a person wanted to buy a home, because I just want to build our listeners up, they've never bought a home before. What is it, like the first top 3 things that they need to think about, that they need to do? Because Millie and I were talking earlier, it's not like back in the day where I'm thinking of buying a house and someone, works with you, handholds you months. You guys are busy, you're busy. So what should a person do to before they come in your presence if they want to purchase a home?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that people need to do is stop living beyond their means.
Stop trying to keep
up. Say it louder for the people in the back.
That's the very first thing that people need to do. You need to stop spending money that I'm going to have to interrupt just to scoot over. I need to charge my computer.
That's okay.
But the first thing that people need to do is consider, how they're spending their money. So are you paying for weave hair that you can't afford? Excuse me, ladies. I'm sorry about this. Are you paying for, weave hair that you can't afford, driving a car that you can't afford, jewelry, purses, travel, when you start to look at the thousands of dollars that people spend on those types of things, it results in ultimately a down payment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It results ultimately in the earnest money deposit. I mean, Mel, you know this, right? Like it results in that. And people always talk about what they can't do.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at how people are spending money and, how the accumulation of that money could result in your 10, your 15, your 20, your $30,000, you could be in a house, right? And when I get people who come to me and they're basically like, well, I can't afford to buy a house. And I look at what they're driving or what they're wearing or, even where their kids go to school. And I'm like, you really can afford to buy a house. And that almost needs to be the priority, right? Like what happens is, especially I feel like for most of us as people of color, depending on how we were raised, we try to avoid our kids experiencing, you
want to give them more. Right.
Exactly. So it's like, we don't want our kids to be raised like us. So we want to spend a whole bunch of money to educate them, a whole bunch of money to send them here and send them there. But at the end of the day, you turn around, you almost 50 years old and you've been renting your apartment forever. But little Junior has been going to, the best schools and, traveling the world. And at the end of the day, your mama, and I'm speaking from experience. This is not, to bring anybody down in any way, shape, or form, but just to say, like, look at that. Like, how does that really look? So that would be the first thing for me. I would say live within your means.
Right.
Don't worry about the junk and really figure out ways in which you could really save money, right?
Right.
So that would be
that's the first thing. What about the second thing?
The second thing would be to connect with a lender to figure out from a loan perspective how much you actually qualify for. A lot of people just don't know.
Okay.
They have no idea what that looks like. And because of that, they sort of rule themselves out. They think they can't afford it. They think that they can't do it. They can't afford it. I can never buy a house. Well, it's like, you don't know. Let's see what you look like on paper. And from there, once you work with the lender, then you're able to figure out what that credit score is, figure out how much you need to pay, what you need to pay off, you know what I mean? And actually how much you qualify for. Once you know those numbers, then you can start the shopping process. But without that, you can't. And I think that, some of the things are really obvious in terms of, if you got bills and you got bills and you think that just because it happened when you was 26, now you 36, you think it went away. It ain't went away.
All them people figure it out.
Right, exactly. Get on the payment plan. Figure it out. You know what I mean? Make it happen.
Everybody waiting for a 10-year fall off. Like some stuff is not falling off. Call
Exactly.
You gotta take care of that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's really sort of out of style at this stage to have bad credit. Like,
isn't it?
That? Like that
isn't it?
Having that. But if that's where you are, then start with that. You know what I mean? If that's where you are,
okay, start with that.
Figure it out. Start with that.
Okay, so that's number 2. What's number 3?
So number 3 would be figure out geographically where you could realistically live, and you do that with a real estate agent.
Great point.
So some people, struggle with, I don't want to live in Antioch. Well, the reality is that's what you can afford. So you can feel some kind of way about it if you want to, but you're not staying in Oakland at no $650,000 loan approval.
No.
Or a 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
Exactly, unless you're planning on getting a condo. You know what I mean? But I would say realistically figure out geographically what that looks like for you, because it could not look as bad as you think, right? When you start to look at, coming outside, going on just sort of on the outskirts of what you're familiar with. Right. It could actually, you could land in a neighborhood that you might appreciate, and a skilled realtor that knows the area could put you in, some places that, especially if it's stuff that you haven't considered. I think that people get really comfortable in only wanting to sort of be in one place and space, because sometimes that's all they know. But when you open, when you keep yourself open, and I tell people, don't look at it as your forever home, right? Most of us are young enough. And when I say young enough, I mean 70 and younger. Most of us are young enough where if this is our first purchase, well, I would probably say 60 and younger. If this is our first purchase, we're probably going to buy another house in our lifetime.
No, that's right.
Sure.
Put it out there. It's not your first rodeo, so don't be
right. So, and if that's the case, if you are going to consider buying a second, I mean, if you're going to buy another house, maybe you have to start further out than you want, and then later sort of move in closer to where you want to be.
Right. Right. Those are awesome. Really, really good tips.
Good tips. I hope you're taking notes, listeners.
Yes. And one thing, and I just want to say, Felicia has become a sister friend, but I also was the past client of Felicia. So I definitely really love what she said, because yes, I came to her. The home purchasing process can be scary. I was full of anxiety, and just to see somebody that looked like me, that had the knowledge that she had, I was really excited, because I'm like, where do we start? And so, like you said, all those key things, make sure that you, got savings, right? That you've really, because you want to come into it really confident that this is something that you really want to do, not just window shopping, right?
Using you as a perfect example, because you were prepared, you could compete. So when people aren't prepared, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to make a case for them if they don't have what they need. And you bought a house in one of the most competitive markets ever. You know what I mean? You bought a house and you knocked 15 other buyers out of the box because you were ready.
Felicia, you said you was a numbers girl. And when I came to you, you told us where the numbers, because I'm a numbers girl too. Actually, me and Felicia, we got our MBA from the same place. Shout out to Holy Names. But you was a number girl. Where should we hit it? And you did that. You came, you got it. And so very exciting, but it wasn't an overnight process, but we did handle it in a good amount of time. But that wasn't my first time. I had, to be honest with you guys, I had came to Felicia years prior. But at the time, I was kind of going through some things. I was going through a separation. And at the time, God kind of put in my spirit, this is really not your time to do it, even though I really, really wanted to purchase a home. And then, later, I came back a few years later, and Felicia was my go-to. I knew that I wanted to follow back up with her. And it all just came to fruition and it worked out. So I'm very thankful, and I love my home.
I know.
Amazing neighborhood, all of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And so for all of our listeners out there, I mean, you have a standing client that's giving raving reviews, along with her many other clients. Felicia is a very busy woman, so we really appreciate her time. But before we let her go, I have two more questions. So what would you tell your 8-year-old self?
8?
8-year-old.
8? Oh, 8.
I said 8. I know.
I think I would tell my 8-year-old self to be brave, to, to put fear aside and to do it. You know what I mean? I think, for whatever reason, I think that my 8-year-old self probably hindered me from, my 50-year-old self living my best life for the most part. And I would just say that, the sky is the limit, especially now in terms of resources and information and podcasts and, sister circles and all of that, where, the sky is the limit for us as women of color. No matter, I feel like we oftentimes, I think our men of color have it really hard. But I think us as women of color, we have it just as hard. Because we're dealing with, we are, and often respects, a triple threat. But I would just say, be courageous on your journey. Don't operate in fear, but be courageous.
Yes. Now, one last thing I want you to ask you about before we leave out, Felicia. So I know you have your Get Your House in Order book. Is that ready? Is it coming? Share with our listeners.
So pray for me as I pray for myself. Okay. That book has to be
for sure.
It has to be ready at the end of April. And it's in the works. Like it's on the tip of my tongue. And the goal is that it will be ready.
We're gonna put it into existence. It's gonna be ready, y'all. Lastly, for the people that may be
wait. Felicia has a workshop though. I wanted her to say I wanted to say about all this stuff.
Yeah, so I do have Get Your House in Order workshop, and it's a workshop designed to help people to get to acknowledge where they are with their business affairs, their personal affairs, and to get them in order. So, if you don't own a house, let's look at that. If you don't have, the right loan product or even know your loan situation, let's look at that. But more importantly, let's look at your will or your trust. Do you have assets that you need to designate to someone in the event that something happens to you? Do you have a medical directive in the event that physically something had to happen to you and people had to make decisions? Does your sister, your aunt, your mother, are they in agreement with your kids, for example? Your kids might be like, don't take my mama off that respirator. And your sister might be like, we keeping her off, we taking her off.
And that happens. That's real.
So true.
So, Get Your House in Order forces people to, figure out, do you have the right kind of insurance for yourself? What does the right kind of insurance look like? And making sure that not only are you acknowledging where you are with those things, but that you're actually actively doing something. So we challenge people at the end of the workshop to start today, start tomorrow, get accountable to somebody and figure it out. Who do you need to call to help you get your house in order? There are 5 pillars, which include insurance, estate planning, real estate loans, and I said insurance already, right? So the four pillars of getting your house in order.
I like that you said insurance.
Now, is that a virtual or in?
So we are going
virtual or in?
We're doing in person. The first in person since the pandemic is going to be April 7th in Oakland, which is Thursday night, and it's going to be in Oakland at the port. What are the port lofts? We're gonna
over there.
Yep, we're gonna bring everybody together to just sort of talk about especially now that the pandemic has happened, is your stuff together? And if not, let's focus on getting together. I strongly believe that it's never too late to get your house in order. It's never ever too late. And the beauty of it is your family, those you love, they deserve it. No one wants to deal with your mess.
Ooh,
something happens.
Yes.
Right.
No one.
Yes.
I'm glad that you said it was the reason why you said life insurance twice, because we got to understand as people, because let's stop using GoFundMe.
Girl, I don't even pay. I don't even.
I know it happens sometime, but we, like you said, get your house in order. If we prepare, we don't have to go through that, right?
And how embarrassing is it for someone to have worked all their lives and their family can't bear it?
I know.
That's right. Yeah,
death is inevitable. People don't like to talk about it, but death is inevitable. So let's, get our house in order in that way that people don't have to get in your business. As soon as y'all GoFundMe go up, they already know your business.
I know that's right. Then you put it out there on social media.
Like so
for our listeners. So for our listeners out there, if you didn't learn one thing today, if you did not pick up what Felicia was dropping down, it is to get your house in order. Felicia, where can they find you? What's your website? Where can people find you?
So I can easily be found at FeliciaDuncan.com. That's Felicia with 2 I's. So FELICIA Duncan.com. And that's DUNCAN. Okay. Or by email, it's Felicia@FeliciaDuncan.com. Or I can be even reached by phone. I'm married to this phone of mine, which is 510-581-1779.
Last thing I have. Now you talked about how we can do the home buying, but what about people want to get into the real estate game? They got the Selling with Tampa, all these shows that's making it look like really the boss. The boss.
And every time I see that, I think about Felicia. I'm like, Felicia could do this.
So I will tell you first and foremost, stop watching those shows because they make it look easier than it actually is.
I know that's right.
I felt like that too. Yeah.
My own situation. I mean, I bought my first property, I want to say 20 something years ago. But everything after that has happened within the last 8 years. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like, but I would say first and foremost, you got to get your foot in the game with your own home and then leverage yourself that way. There are so many ways. We talk about it and get your house in order, but you can consider purchasing with a friend or family member. You want to look at something with positive cash flow. I am not a huge fan of buying out of state unless you have someone you trust and know who can manage the asset for you. But I do know people who benefit from that. You can even consider in your own state. Sometimes I say if you can drive to it, depending on the time, then that might be, a good distance for you. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are making a smart investment and not an emotional one. So for me on income property, if it doesn't make over $1,000 a month, it doesn't make sense to me, but maybe your threshold is $500, right? If you're making, if you're bringing in $500 off of it after all of your expenses, then the consideration there, it can be considered a good investment. But another thing is keep in mind with that income property, you still have to have the money to save because now it's not your personal property. And because of that, you have to come to the table with a little more down. So you got to, look at those numbers and build yourself up to a space where I have a client who she does this thing where she buys a property and then she saves her 20%. And when she gets her 20% for the next one, then she buys another property. And that's sort of, what you have to do. But to expedite that, you can consider purchasing with other people, considering duplex or unit. Culturally, other cultures have done that. Especially in the Asian culture, if they buy multi-units, they will live in them until the one person is able to move out. Then that person purchase a house. And they will do that until the building is vacant, till everybody has their space. So you have to sort of figure out what works for you and your threshold. And I would lastly say, just be mindful. Like I said, those shows make it look really, really easy, but rent control in some places are real, and you can fool around and have a pandemic and your tenants not pay, and you're still responsible for that mortgage. So, make really smart business decisions and not emotional ones, because those shows, they make it look good. At this point, I always joke and say that, places like the Bay Area are flipped out. It ain't a whole bunch of properties that are, going to be such a good deal and free and all that. Those days are long gone. Because
we're already sitting on top of each other.
Yes, exactly. And everybody has money. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people have money, and they can come in and money, people are very creative with it, and even though rates are going up, rates are relatively still low. I know I bought my first house and my rate was like almost 8%. So, when people are talking about this 3%, like 4%, I'm like, girl, like I've seen worse. I've seen worse. But with money being, cheaper to borrow, it does, give you some flexibility. But on the income property side, you have to consider the down payment amount. And like I said, those shows make it look easy. It's easy to come up with 20% when you're buying in Florida and the house is only 130.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Talk about downtown. I'm selling a fourplex in Oakland right now. I'm selling it for 2.27.
Yeah.
No, 2.72.
Dang.
Exactly. So do
Dang.
20% on that. Do 20% on that.
And look at the commission on that. I don't know about y'all, but I want to be like Felicia when I grow up.
And I will say, in the midst of this, and I always say this to people, especially those interested in becoming real estate agents, I'm grateful for this space that I'm in. I'm grateful for the business. 85% of my business last year was referrals. That's a blessing. It speaks volumes. But I will also say that this is 16 years in the making. I did not wake up like this.
There you go.
I worked 2 jobs. I had with a little girl in the backseat and eating McDonald's, up at night studying for holy names. Like all of that happened. So, there was some seeds planted and watered in the process, and I did not wake up like this.
Okay.
I did not. But it's
and see you and for our listeners. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's possible. It's so possible. When I look at, it's possible. It's so possible with hard work.
No, I was just gonna say I respect the grit of Miss Felicia because she definitely has the grit and the grind to make it possible. So if you didn't take anything from this podcast, is she did not wake up like this, and she is not new to this. She is true to this.
Okay.
She is 16 plus years in. She's doing her thing. Like I said, if you don't know her, if you're in the Bay Area, you most definitely need to get to know her. She's very low key, but she has it going on. That's why she does her little sniggles because she knows it. She knows it.
I'm such an introvert. Like if I didn't have to go outside, I wouldn't.
You're introvert, extrovert.
I'm in between. On the day.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. We know you are busy. You're probably going to sell a home right now after this. And for our listeners, contact her. It's Felicia Duncan. You can find her pretty much everywhere.
And Felicia, we're gonna be waiting for that book, right? So everybody,
I'm so happy.
Yes,
I'm so happy you called me out on it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna text you. Thank you. Love, much blessings. Talk
Thank
to
you, ladies. This is amazing. I appreciate you greatly.
Absolutely. Bye.
Thanks, Felicia. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.